The night I left, it was raining in Seattle. Not the soft, romantic kind of rain that makes you want to curl up with someone warm. No, this was the ugly, violent kind, the kind that soaks through your jacket in 30 seconds and makes you feel like the sky itself is angry at you. I stood on the sidewalk outside the pack house with one bag over my shoulder, a positive pregnancy test shoved into my coat pocket, and the words I just heard playing on a loop in my head like a song I desperately wanted to forget. He's just a convenient omega. Don't read into it. Jaehan's voice. Low, certain, unbothered. I remember thinking even in that moment, even while my chest was caving in, that the most devastating part wasn't what he said. It was how easily he said it. No hesitation, no drop in his voice. Like I was a fact he was simply clarifying. And like I was furniture, he was describing to someone who'd asked what the couch was for. Functional, temporary, nothing more. I pressed my hand flat against my stomach and told myself to breathe. My name is Yanwu. Park Yanwu. 24 years old. Omega. Former literature student. Current disaster. And apparently, for the last 8 months, nothing more than a scheduling convenience for 3 of the most powerful alpha triplets on the West Coast. Let me back up not too far, I promise. Because honestly, the beginning isn't even the interesting part. The interesting part is the fact that I, a fully grown, reasonably intelligent adult, somehow convinced myself that what we had was real. That's the part that should fascinate you. That's the part that still fascinates me 2 years later, just sitting in a tiny apartment in Chicago with a toddler asleep on my chest and the audacity to still remember what Siwoo's laugh sounded like when he thought something was genuinely funny. I hate that I remember that. But let's go back to Seattle, to the pack house on the edge of Magnolia, the one that sat on a hill like it was judging the rest of the neighborhood. 3 stories, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen that cost more than my entire college tuition. The kind of home that made you feel safe and suffocated at the exact same time. I had been living there for 8 months. 8 months of shared dinners and quiet mornings. 8 months of Doyun leaving coffee outside my door before I woke up, and Siwoo stealing the blanket during movie nights and refusing to apologize, and Jaehan cold, careful. No magnetic Jaehan reading beside me in silence like my presence was something he'd decided to tolerate, and then, somewhere along the way, decided he couldn't do without. Or so I thought. I was coming back from the pharmacy that evening. I hadn't told any of them why I needed to go out alone. I'd been feeling off for 2 weeks, quietly terrified of what my body was trying to tell me. And when the test confirmed what I already knew in my gut, I sat in a pharmacy bathroom stall in Capitol Hill for 10 full minutes, just staring at the ceiling. Okay, I told myself. Okay, you're going to go home. You're going to tell them. It's going to be complicated, but you'll figure it out. I believed that. I genuinely believed it. I came back through the side entrance, the one that opened into the hall near Jaehan's study, because the rain had started and the front porch light was off, and I was already wet and irritable and not in the mood to struggle with the main door lock. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I wasn't creeping. I was just a soggy, newly pregnant Omega trying to get inside his house. And then I heard it. Jaehan's voice through the slightly open study door even, composed, with that particular flatness he used when he was talking business. Don't overthink the arrangement. He's a convenient Omega. That's all it's been. I stopped. I heard the murmur of another voice, someone on the phone, I realized. A pack elder, maybe. Someone questioning the bond, questioning me, and then Jaehan again, and quieter but perfectly clear. Nothing about this is permanent. I looked down at my coat pocket. At the outline of the test, I was still carrying. I didn't cry. I want you to know that. I didn't crumble against the wall or press my hand to my mouth or do any of the dramatic things people do in movies when their heart breaks. I just stood there in the dark hallway, soaking wet, and felt something shift inside me, something quiet and final, like a door closing on its own. I looked toward the living room. Through the glass panel, I could see Siwoo and Doyun on the couch. Doyun was reading. Siwoo was on his phone. They had heard. I knew they had alphas don't miss sounds like that, and neither of them moved. Neither of them said a word. That was the part that finished me. Not Jaehan's voice, their silence. I turned around. I walked back out into the rain, stood on the sidewalk with my bag and my secret in the ruins of 8 months. And I made a decision with the kind of terrifying calm that only comes when you realize you have absolutely nothing left to lose. I was leaving, and I was taking every inconvenient, unplanned, beautiful consequence of this arrangement with me. The rain had soaked through my second layer by the time I reached the corner of the block. My sneakers made that embarrassing squeaking sound with every step, the kind that would have made Siwoo laugh under normal circumstances. He had this thing about finding humor in the most inappropriate moments. I used to love that about him. Standing there in the wet dark, I decided I was going to hate it instead. Retroactively, effective immediately. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my rideshare app with fingers that were only slightly shaking. Mostly from cold, mostly. The nearest driver was 4 minutes away. 4 minutes, standing in the rain outside the house of 3 men who had collectively decided I was a scheduling convenience. I almost laughed. I would have, except my chest felt like someone had reached in and rearranged everything without asking, and laughing required more structural integrity than I currently had access to. My phone buzzed. Siwoo. Hey, did you get back? It's raining hard. I stared at the message for a long moment. The little typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Dohyun. Yeonwoo, where are you? I turned my phone face down in my palm and kept standing there. Here's something people don't tell you about the moment your life splits in two. It doesn't feel cinematic. There's no swelling music. Nobody's eyes are glassy and beautiful in the rain. You're just cold and tired, and your left sneaker has a hole you've been meaning to fix for 3 weeks, and the rideshare driver is now 5 minutes away because he took a wrong turn on Drive Street. I watched the little car icon crawl across my screen and thought about Jaehan's voice. Nothing about this is permanent. He wasn't wrong. That was the brutal part. He was describing something real, something I had also tried to convince myself of in the beginning. When I first moved in, I told myself it was temporary, practical. 3 alphas needed a stable pack Omega presence for the quarter, while their official arrangements were being renegotiated. I needed housing and a stipend while I finished my final thesis credits remotely. Clean, functional, temporary. The problem was that nobody told my biology about the arrangement. Nobody explained the terms to whatever part of me woke up every morning and noticed how Dohyun's hands were always warm, or the part that cataloged every time Jaehan looked up from a book to check if I was still in the room, or the part that started leaving an extra cup on the counter every morning because Siwoo always came down 10 minutes after me and always pretended he hadn't been hoping coffee would already be made. I had built an entire home inside people who were apparently still living in a contract. The car pulled up. A silver sedan. And the driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror with the particular exhaustion of someone who had picked up too many drenched passengers tonight and was done being surprised by any of it. SeaTac? He asked. Yes, I said, and my voice came out steady, which genuinely shocked me. I got in, closed the door. The warmth of the car hit me all at once, and I pressed my back against the seat and stared at the rain sliding down the window and breathed. My phone was buzzing continuously now. I didn't look at it. I was doing the math instead. I had enough in my personal account for a one-way ticket and 2 weeks in a cheap extended stay somewhere. My mother's sister lived in Chicago, Aunt Minji, who I hadn't spoken to in 8 months because I'd been too absorbed in pack life to maintain normal human relationships, which now struck me as both ironic and on-brand for my entire personality. She would take me in. She would ask too many questions and make me eat too much and hover in that specific way that felt equal parts smothering and safe. And right now, the idea of being smothered by someone who actually chose to care about me sounded like the closest thing to paradise I could imagine. I pulled up flights. There was one leaving at 11:40 p.m., 3 hours from now. I bought the ticket before I could think too hard about it. That's the thing about making enormous life decisions. While emotionally concussed, the hesitation mechanism stops working. I booked a middle seat, which is objectively the worst seat on any aircraft, and I did not even flinch. That's how I knew I was serious. My phone went quiet. Then one final message came through. Not Siwoo. Not Dohyun. Jaehan. Come inside. You'll get sick. I read it twice. And then, because I have always had a deeply inconvenient sense of humor that refuses to shut off even during personal catastrophes, I almost typed back, too late, already sick, also pregnant, also leaving. Have a great quarter. I didn't send that. I turned my phone off entirely, slid it into my bag, and watched Seattle disappear through the rain-blurred window as the car moved toward the highway. I pressed my hand flat against my stomach again. Quiet. Steady. Okay, I told whoever was in there, whoever this inconvenient, beautiful, terrifying new person was going to be. It's just us now, and we're going to be absolutely fine. I almost believed it. The airport was exactly the kind of controlled chaos that suited my current emotional state perfectly. Bright lights, moving bodies, announcements overlapping each other in that flat, unhurried tone that somehow made every piece of urgent information sound like a suggestion. I moved through check-in on autopilot, one bag, no checked luggage, nothing to declare except a broken arrangement and a secret that was currently the size of a raspberry and already completely ruining my life in the best possible way. Security was blessedly fast. I found my gate, sat down in one of those aggressively uncomfortable plastic chairs, and allowed myself exactly 3 minutes of staring at the floor and feeling sorry for myself. I timed it. When the 3 minutes were up, I straightened my spine, pushed my damp hair back, and pulled out my phone. 47 missed calls, not texts, calls. 47 of them distributed across 3 contact names, with the particular frantic energy of men who had apparently just realized that convenient arrangements have legs and can use them. I turned the phone back off. Then I turned it back on because I needed the boarding pass. Technology is deeply inconvenient when you're trying to make a dramatic exit. While I waited, I did what any reasonable person does in a moment of complete personal upheaval. I made a list. I am a chronic list maker. It's one of my worst qualities and also one of my best. And right now, my brain needed something to organize, or it was going to start processing feelings again, and I was not ready for that. List things I was not going to miss about the pack house. 1. The way the third floor hallway always smelled faintly of cedar and something sharper underneath. Something that lived in my chest like a splinter I'd stopped trying to remove. I was not going to miss that. 2. Siwoo finishing my sentences and being right about 60% of the time, and insufferably smug about it. 3. The specific sound of Do-Yun's footsteps on the stairs at night. Slow and deliberate. The way he moved like someone who had learned to take up exactly the right amount of space, and not a fraction more. 4. Jaehan's hands. I stopped the list there. I started a different list. Things I was absolutely prepared for. 1. Chicago winter, which I had been told was essentially Seattle rain but frozen and personally hostile. 2. Aunt Minji's cooking, which was extraordinary, and her questions, which were not. 3. Doing this alone. I sat with that one for a moment. Doing this alone. I want to be very clear about something. I was not fragile. I have never been the kind of Omega who required rescue or maintenance. I grew up in a household where my mother worked double shifts, and my father's idea of emotional support was pointing at problems and saying, figure it out. And while I do not recommend that parenting style, it did produce someone with an extremely high tolerance for difficulty and a deeply sarcastic internal monologue that kicks in automatically under stress. I was going to be fine. I was also terrified, not of the baby. The baby felt strangely solid in all of this, like the one thing that had weight when everything else had gone liquid. I was terrified of the years ahead, of the specific loneliness of making decisions for 2 people while pretending to be entirely okay, of the moment, somewhere down the road, when my child would ask about his father's, and I would have to decide how much of the truth was mine to give. My boarding group was called. I stood up, adjusted my bag, took one breath. Then my phone lit up in my hand. Not a call this time, a message. From a number I didn't recognize, which normally I would have ignored, but something made me open it. This is Nari, Jaehan's pack liaison. I know you don't know me. I know this is not my place. But you should know that whatever you heard tonight was not the full conversation. I'm not saying this to bring you back. I'm saying it because You deserve to know there's more to the story. Please be safe. I stood in the boarding line and read that message 4 times. The line moved forward. I moved with it. Here's what I thought about Nari's message in that moment. Absolutely nothing useful. Because the thing about being told there's more to the story when you are already at the gate with a boarding pass and a one-way ticket is that more story doesn't actually help you. More story is not a house. More story is not a co-parent. More story doesn't change the fact that I was standing there, drenched and exhausted and quietly growing an entire human being, while the men who should have been my people were apparently in the middle of a political chess game. I hadn't been told I was a piece in. Maybe there was more context. Maybe Jaehan had his reasons. Maybe the sky above Seattle was full of asterisks and footnotes explaining everything. But he hadn't come after me. Neither had Siwoo. Neither had Dohyun. The 47 calls, and not one of them had gotten in a car. I handed my boarding pass to the attendant. She scanned it. The gate beeped once, clean and final. Like punctuation at the end of a sentence I hadn't finished writing. I walked down the jetway. I did not look back. And somewhere over the Cascades, pressed into a middle seat between a snoring businessman and a college student watching cartoons, I finally let myself cry. Just for a little while. Just until the clouds swallowed Seattle whole and there was nothing left to see. Then I dried my face, asked the flight attendant for water, and started planning the rest of my life. Chicago received me the way Chicago receives everyone in November, with absolute zero hospitality, and a wind that hit my face the moment I stepped outside baggage claim, like it had been waiting specifically for me. I gasped out loud, an actual involuntary, undignified gasp, the kind that made the man next to me glance over with the sympathetic eyes of someone who had made the same mistake of underestimating this city. First time, he asked. Last time, I said. I meant it in the moment. I did not mean it, as it turned out, because Chicago had other plans for me entirely. But standing on that curb at 2 in the morning with wet hair that was now developing ice crystals at the ends, I was completely sincere. Aunt Minji arrived 12 minutes late in a burgundy minivan that had a cracked side mirror and a pine tree air freshener that had clearly been there since 2019. She pulled up, rolled down the window, looked at me standing there with one bag and the particular expression of someone who had recently made several enormous decisions and said, "You look terrible." "Thank you," I said. "I've been working on it." She got out of the car and hugged me anyway. Hard. The kind of hug that doesn't ask questions first and saves them all for later, which is the only correct kind. She smelled like the hand cream she'd used my entire life, something with jasmine in it, and I pressed my face into her shoulder for exactly 2 seconds before I made myself pull back, because if I stayed there any longer, I was going to come completely apart on a public curb in Chicago, and I had a personal policy against that. She drove. I sat in the passenger seat and watched the city move past the window, all lit up and enormous and indifferent to my existence, which I found oddly comforting. "Are you going to tell me what happened?" she asked. "Eventually," I said. "Are you okay?" I considered lying. It would have been easy. I am exceptionally good at performing fine. It's practically a skill set at this point. Yeah, but Minji had known me since I was 7 years old, and she had radar for my specific brand of okay that nothing had ever successfully jammed. "Not even a little bit," I said. She nodded. Changed lanes, didn't push. I loved her enormously in that moment. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building in Logan Square that smelled like old wood and someone's cooking from 2 floors down. The spare room was small, with a window that looked out at a fire escape, and beyond that, a slice of street-lit orange by the sodium lamps. She had already made up the bed. There was a glass of water on the nightstand and a plate covered in foil that turned out to be pajeon, still faintly warm, because Minji expressed love through food and timing, and never through words if she could help it. I sat on the edge of the bed and ate standing up because I was too tired to think about positioning. The pajeon was perfect. Crispy at the edges, soft in the middle, with enough green onion to remind me of every childhood Saturday I'd spent in my grandmother's kitchen pretending to help while actually just eating. I finished it, set the plate down, looked at my hands. Then I said it out loud for the first time in the empty room to no one. I'm pregnant. The words sat in the air, strange and real and irrevocable. Okay, I said back to myself, because someone had to respond and I was the only one there. Okay, you're pregnant. You're in Chicago. You have $43 in checking and a literature degree and an aunt who makes excellent Peijon. This is fine. People have started with less. My phone was still on. I had turned it back on somewhere over Wisconsin because I needed the Maps app, and I am not built for true disconnection no matter how dramatic the circumstances. There were now 62 missed calls and a string of messages that I scrolled through with the detached curiosity of someone reading about events that had happened to a stranger. Siwoo. Yeonwoo. Where are you, please? Just tell me you're safe. Dohyun. I'm calling the airports. Siwoo. Hyun, don't do that. You'll just scare him. Dohyun. He's already scared. Siwoo. We don't know that. Dohyun. Yes, we do. And then, after a gap of about 40 minutes, Jaehan. I know you heard me. I know how it sounded. Don't make a decision tonight. I read that last one twice. Don't make a decision tonight. As though I was sitting somewhere nearby, emotionally overwhelmed, just needing time to cool down before I came back to have a reasonable conversation. As though I was still inside a story where his voice was the variable that changed my math. I typed back one thing. I already made it. Then I turned the phone face down on the nightstand, lay back on top of the covers still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling of a room that smelled like old wood and someone else's life. Outside, Chicago hummed. Indifferent. Enormous. Mine now, whether I was ready or not. I pressed my hand against my stomach. 2 heartbeats in one body, one plan between us. It was the most terrifying and most clarifying thing I'd ever felt. 2 years later, I still remembered that ceiling. I know I said no time skips. But this isn't a skip, this is the Omega's memory, pulling him back mid-breath. The way trauma and love both tend to ambush you while you're doing something completely ordinary. And what was pulling me back was the sound of my son's laughter echoing down the hallway of our Logan Square apartment. Bright and completely unself-conscious, the kind of laugh that made strangers on the street stop and smile without knowing why. Iseul was 2 years and 3 months old. He had Jaehan's jaw, Siwoo's mouth, Dohyun's eyes, that particular depth of dark brown that looked like it was always thinking something 3 steps ahead of whatever was happening in the room. He had my stubbornness, my need to narrate everything out loud, and apparently my complete inability to sleep past 6 in the morning, which I considered a personal betrayal for my own genetics. He was also currently standing in the kitchen doorway wearing one sock and holding a wooden spoon like a weapon. Appa, he said with tremendous gravity. I need eggies. Good morning to you too, I said, from my position on the kitchen floor, where I was attempting to locate the lid to the blender that Minji had definitely hidden somewhere passive-aggressive after I left it in the drying rack wrong last week. Eggies require me to be vertical first. You are vertical, Iseul said, with the devastating logical precision of a toddler who had not yet learned that adults need grace. I'm diagonal at best. He considered this, decided it was acceptable, climbed onto the bottom cabinet drawer like a tiny, determined mountaineer and sat on the counter to wait. I found the lid behind the cutting board, obviously. This was our morning. No, every morning. Chaotic, domestic, loud, hours. And I want to be clear, I was not miserable. I know that seems impossible given the setup, given everything I left behind, given that I was raising a child alone in a city that had taken me 2 full winters to stop resenting. But miserable is not what I was. Exhausted, yes. Stretched thin in ways I hadn't known a person could be stretched. Occasionally standing in the shower at night, letting hot water run on my face, while I had 30 seconds of feelings before getting back to the business of existing. But not miserable. Iseul made that impossible. He was so aggressively, inconveniently wonderful that some mornings I looked at him and felt this enormous, complicated thing that had no clean name. Not just love, though it was that. Something bigger, and something that had transformed every loss into a different shape, Not smaller, but somehow bearable. I scrambled his eggs. He narrated the process in real time. He had recently discovered that narrating things was extremely powerful, and he was using this discovery constantly. Appa is putting in the egg, he reported to no one. Appa is adding cheese, he continued. Appa looks tired. Appa is always tired, I confirmed. Appa respects your journalistic commitment. He beamed. He had no idea what journalistic meant. He beamed anyway. I slid the eggs onto his plate and leaned against the counter with my coffee and watched him eat with the focused intensity of someone who took scrambled eggs extremely seriously. He had this habit. When he was concentrating, a small vertical line appeared between his brows. Now, this tiny, precise crease that lived on his forehead like punctuation. I had noticed it first at 4 months old in the blue early morning dark while he was working out the logistics of a yawn. I had pressed my thumb gently against that crease then and thought, you came from three of the most complicated people I have ever known, and none of them have any idea you exist. I thought that now too, standing in the kitchen in the thin November light. Minji appeared in the doorway in her robe, hair pinned up, reading glasses already on, even though it was 6:43 in the morning. She looked at Iseul, looked at me. Did that specific thing with her expression that was not quite a question, but was absolutely a comment. He called me at 11, she said. I went very still. Who? I said. Not a question. No, because there was only one he that Minji said in that particular tone of voice. The one that meant she had been sitting on information and had decided this morning was the moment to deploy it. Siwoo, she said. He found this number somehow. I didn't answer. But he left a voicemail. She held her phone out. I looked at it the way you look at something that you know is going to change the temperature of the room. How long have you had that? I said. 3 days. Minji, I was waiting for a good moment. There is no good moment for this. She had the decency to look slightly guilty, only slightly. Do you want to hear it? Iseul looked up from his eggs. He looked at me with Do-hyun's eyes, steady, patient, already somehow reading the room better than most adults I knew. Appa okay? He asked. Oh, and I reached over and smoothed down the back of his hair, that soft mess of dark that curled slightly at the ends when it was humid. Yeah, baby, I said. Appa's okay. I picked up Minji's phone. My hand was steady. My heartbeat was not. I pressed play. The voicemail was 47 seconds long. I know because I watched the timestamp crawl across the screen like it was personally taking its time to ruin my morning. Siwoo's voice came through the speaker, and my whole body reacted before my brain could issue a single rational instruction. Shoulders up, breath shallow, coffee cup gripped slightly tighter than necessary. Yan-woo. A pause. He sounded different. Not bad different, just worn? Like a jacket that had been through too many seasons without proper care. I know you probably won't listen to this. That's okay. I need you to know we've been looking. Not to pressure you. Not to drag you back into anything. Just, we needed to know you were alive and okay, and I couldn't sleep until... Another pause. Longer this time. I'm sorry. His voice dropped on those two words. Went quiet in a way that Siwoo almost never went quiet. Because Siwoo filled rooms. That was his entire personality. He occupied space like he'd been appointed to do it. This quiet was not his natural register, and it landed on me like something physical. I don't know what you heard that night. I don't know what we looked like from where you were standing. But I need you to know that I wanted to come after you. I was already standing up. Jaehan told me to wait, said to give you space, give you. And he said if we chased you, it would feel like pressure and you needed to choose to come back on your own. A sound that might have been a humorless exhale. I've been angry at him for that every single day since, for what it's worth, which is probably nothing. But the voicemail ended, just like that. Mid-sentence, like he'd run out of recording time or courage, one of the two. I stood in the kitchen holding Minji's phone and felt approximately 11 different things happening simultaneously in my chest, which is 2 more than I could competently manage before coffee. Iseul had finished his eggs. He was now watching me with the unnerving focus of a child who had already learned that adults got quiet in interesting ways sometimes, and that quiet was usually important. Appa sad? He asked. Appa is processing, I said. What is processing? It's when your brain gets too much information and needs a minute to sort it into the right folders. He thought about this very seriously. My brain has folders? Yours has color-coded tabs, I said. Very organized. Takes after me. That got a smile. He went back to his spoon, dragging it through the leftover egg residue with scientific interest. I set the phone down on the counter. I wanted to be unmoved. I had built a very functional life on being unmoved by things that originated from that pack house on the hill in Seattle. I had constructed it carefully over 2 years, brick by brick, with the mortar of routine and necessity and the particular stubbornness that Iseul had apparently inherited directly from my bone marrow. I was good at unmoved. Siwoo's voice had walked straight through it like it wasn't there. What are you going to do? Minji asked. She was leaning in the doorway now, arms crossed, watching me with the expression she reserved for situations she had opinions about, but was attempting to withhold for my benefit. Nothing, I said. Yeonwoo. I mean it. Nothing right now. I need to think. You've been thinking for 2 years, and I'll need approximately 2 more. I picked my coffee back up. Minji? He left a voicemail. He didn't show up. There's a difference. She made a sound that communicated volumes without using a single word. A full editorial in one exhale. I ignored it with the practiced ease of someone who had been ignoring Minji's editorial since childhood. But here's the thing about voicemails from people who used to be your people. They don't stay in the phone. They migrate. They find the part of you that you thought you'd successfully restructured, and they set up temporary residence there, uninvited, playing on a loop at the worst possible moments. I was loading Iseul into his coat an hour later, the puffy blue one with the barriers on the hood that he had opinions about because the left ear sat slightly lower than the right. And this bothered him on a deep, personal level when it happened for the first time. He lifted his arms for me to zip him up, and I saw it. That crease between his brows. That small, precise line of concentration. And for the first time in 2 years, I didn't think of it as a feature I'd cataloged and filed away safely. For the first time, it moved through me like an ache with a name attached to it. Jaehan. That was Jaehan's crease. Now, Jaehan's particular way of thinking very hard about ordinary things as though they deserve the same gravity as consequential ones. Iseul looked up at me. Appa, he said. You stopped. Sorry. I zipped the coat, smoothed down the left ear. Better? He assessed. Nodded once. Satisfied. I stood up and reached for my own jacket, and that was the exact moment my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I answered it because I was still in the soft, reckless headspace left by 47 seconds of Siwoo's voice, and my judgment was temporarily compromised. Yeonwoo. Not Siwoo this time. Deeper. Quieter. The voice of someone who chose every word before releasing it into the world. Jaehan. My hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? I said. My voice came out flat and even, which I was proud of. Nari, he said. I know, I'm sorry, I just needed to hear your voice. And the worst part, the genuinely catastrophic part, was that something in me that had no business still being alive went quiet and warm at the sound of his. Iseul tugged my sleeve. I looked down at him, at Jaehan's jaw and Do-Yoon's eyes and Siwoo's smile and my own stubborn mouth all assembled into one small perfect person who had absolutely no idea what was happening. Ready, Appa, he said. I was not ready. I was the opposite of ready. Yeah, I told him. Let's go. I put the phone back against my ear while simultaneously trying to help Iseul find his left shoe, which had somehow migrated under the radiator overnight in the way that toddler belongings do, appearing in locations that defy reasonable explanation and suggest the shoe had its own agenda. Yeonwoo, Jaehan said again. Just my name. He had always done that. Used my name like punctuation, like a period at the end of a sentence that meant something different every time. I'm here, I said. I have approximately 4 minutes before I need to leave for daycare drop-off, so if you have something to say, I'd suggest efficiency. A beat of silence, then quietly, you sound the same. I am the same. Exactly the same. Nothing about me has changed whatsoever. I located the shoe, held it out to Iseul, who accepted it with the gravity of someone receiving an important package. What do you want, Jaehan? To explain? You had 2 years to explain. I know. You had 62 phone calls to explain. I know, Yanwu. You had one very dramatic rainy night in Seattle where explaining was literally the only thing that would have fixed everything, and you chose silence. So I'm genuinely curious what explanation you think is available to you now that wasn't available then. Another silence. Longer. I could hear him breathing, and I hated that I recognized the specific rhythm of it. Hated that my body still cataloged information about this man without my permission. You left before I could, he said finally. I came to find you 20 minutes after you walked out. You were already gone. I stopped moving. Iseul, now fully shoed, looked up at me, read my face, went very still in that uncanny way he sometimes did, and that particular stillness that never came from me and always made something in my chest pull sideways. You came to find me, I said carefully. I heard the side door, Jaehan said. I knew you'd used it. I realized what you must have heard. I went outside in the rain like an idiot, and you were gone. Yanwu, I stood on that corner for 20 minutes. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would reestablish the emotional distance I had spent 2 years carefully maintaining like a garden I couldn't afford to let go wild. What came out instead was, you should have called earlier. I know. Day one. Day one you should have called and explained. I know. His voice was doing the quiet thing. The thing where it dropped registers and lost its edges and became something I had no appropriate defense against. I was trying to respect what you decided. Siwoo kept saying, give him time. Doyun said if we pushed, you'd disappear further. And I kept waiting for the right moment that never came. And then 2 weeks became 2 months, and 2 months became 2 years, I said. 2 years, he confirmed. I sat down on the arm of the couch because my legs had made a unilateral decision to stop being fully reliable. Iseul climbed up next to me without being asked, pressed his small, warm side against mine. He did this sometimes, this instinctive thing, like he could sense when I needed ballast and simply provided it without commentary. The most emotionally intelligent 2-year-old in recorded history, which he absolutely got from me because I refused to credit anyone else for that. Jaehan, I said, what were you actually saying that night? Jaehan on the phone. A pause. Careful. Like he was deciding something. The pack elders had been asking questions about you, about our arrangement, about whether you were officially claimed or whether you were a liability. His voice went flat on that last word in a way that told me he was furious even now. Furious and controlled about it, which was the most Jaehan possible response. If I confirmed the bond formally, they had the right to challenge it, to challenge you, to bring you in front of the council, and evaluate whether you were a suitable match for a triplet alpha pack of our standing. I felt something cold move through me. So you told them I was convenient, I said. I told them you were convenient so they would stop looking at you, he said. If you were nothing, you were safe. If you were temporary, they had no reason to touch you. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, Chicago moved past the window, indifferent as always. You were protecting me, I said. It did not come out like a question, but it also did not come out like an accusation. It came out like something landing, something that had been falling for 2 years and had finally hit the floor. I should have told you, he said. I know that. I should have explained the politics, included you in the decision, trusted you with it instead of just handling it. Yeah, I said, you should have. I'm sorry. 3 words from Jaehan. 3 words that cost him something. I could hear it. Could hear the effort of it in the way he said them without any of his usual careful armor. Iseul reached over and patted my knee 3 times, looked up at me. Appa, he said, we're going to be late. Right, daycare, real life. The very grounded and immediate logistics of existing. I have to go, I told Jaehan. I know, Yanwu, can I? Is there any possibility that we could? He stopped, started again. I'm in Chicago. Everything in my body went electrically, catastrophically still. What? I've been here since yesterday, he said quietly. I'm not here to pressure you. I needed to be in the same city. I needed you to know I was close enough to come if you'd let me. I looked at Iseul. Iseul looked at me with his father's eyes and had absolutely no idea. Don't come to my building, I said, and then okay. I mean it. I know. I need to think. Take all the time you need. I ended the call, sat there, stared at the wall. Then Iseul tugged my sleeve with the patience of someone who had places to be. Appa, to shoes. Right, I said. Shoes. I put my shoes on like a person who was not currently having a silent emergency and took my son to daycare like everything was fine. It was not fine. Jaehan was in Chicago, and the explanation I had spent 2 years building a life on top of had just shifted 3 inches to the left and taken the floor with it. It was not fine. Jaehan was in Chicago, and the explanation I had spent 2 years building a life on top of had just shifted 3 inches to the left and taken the floor with it. I dropped Iseul at daycare with the mechanical efficiency of someone running entirely on muscle memory. Miss Hannah, his favorite teacher, met us at the door with her usual warmth. Iseul ran in without looking back, which he always did, which I always pretended did not make me feel both proud and slightly abandoned simultaneously. I stood on the sidewalk outside the daycare and stared at the middle distance. Jaehan was in Chicago, not in Seattle making strategic decisions about my emotional safety without telling me, not on the other end of a phone call managing his words carefully. Here, in this city, in this actual physical cold November Chicago that I had claimed as mine. I started walking, not toward anything specifically, just moving, because standing still felt impossible and going home felt worse. The cold hit my face, and I welcomed it, because at least it was something concrete, something my nerve endings could report accurately, without any complicated interpretation required. My phone buzzed. Do-hyun. He told us he called you. Are you okay? Not a question mark. No, Do-hyun never used question marks when he was actually concerned. The absence of punctuation was somehow more serious than any punctuation could have been. I typed back, define okay. His response came immediately. Functional. Breathing. Not actively fleeing to a third city. Despite everything, despite the full internal catastrophe currently unfolding behind my sternum, I almost smiled. Me, 2 out of 3. Do-hyun, which 2? Me. Guess. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Do-hyun. I'm sorry, Yeonwoo, for that night, for not speaking up, for letting Jaehan's plan run without telling you what it was. That's on me as much as it's on him. I stopped walking. I was on a corner in Logan Square between a coffee shop and a laundromat, and I read that message 3 times. Because Do-hyun did not apologize easily, and that was simply not in his construction. He was the kind of person who showed remorse through action, through quietly fixing things, through leaving coffee outside doors and remembering details nobody asked him to remember. Putting it into words, direct and undecorated like that, cost him something real. I knew it. He knew I knew it. Me. Why are you all in Chicago? Do-hyun. Because you are. 4 words. No punctuation. Absolutely devastating. I put my phone in my pocket and walked into the coffee shop because I needed to sit down and I needed something hot in my hands, and I needed 4 walls around me while I figured out what to do with the fact that apparently all 3 of them had followed me to my city, like very tall, very complicated, very unwanted, entirely wanted problems. And the coffee shop was warm and smelled like espresso and cinnamon and had the kind of low jazz playing that existed specifically to make people feel their feelings in public. I ordered an Americano, sat in the corner, wrapped both hands around the cup, and then the door opened and Siwoo walked in. Not metaphorically, not in the way people appear in your thoughts when you're already thinking about them. Actually walked in, physically, in a dark green coat I had never seen before, hair slightly longer than I remembered, looking around the coffee shop with an expression that shifted the moment his eyes landed on me, from searching to something so unguarded it almost hurt to see. He stopped. I stared at him. He looked exactly like himself and also like 2 years had happened to him, which they had, which was obvious and strange and made my chest do something complicated and unwelcome. I texted Minji, he said from across the coffee shop, not moving closer, just standing there, hands in his pockets, letting me decide the distance. I asked where you went when you needed to think. She told me. I know. Minji, I said flatly, is getting a strongly worded note in her Christmas card this year. Something moved across his face, something that was almost a smile, but too fragile to complete itself. He walked over slowly, stopped at my table, looked at the chair across from me like it was a question. I looked at it too. Then, against every sensible instinct I had carefully cultivated over 24 months, I pushed it out with my foot. He sat down. Up close, he smelled the same. That was the deeply unfair part. On cedar and something warm underneath it. Something that my omega biology recognized and responded to before I could lodge a formal objection. I had forgotten how immediate that was, how it bypassed every rational system I had, and went straight to the part of me that was not interested in being reasonable. I picked up my coffee, took a sip, looked at him over the rim. "You have approximately 10 minutes," I said. "Talk." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, looking at me the way he always had when he was being actually serious. None of the performance, none of the easiness he used as armor. Just Siwoo, reduced to his actual components. "I should have stood up that night," he said, "in the living room, when I heard Jaehan on the phone. I should have walked in there and said something, and I didn't because I thought he had it handled. And that was the laziest, most cowardly thing I have ever done in my life. And I have thought about it every single day since." I set my cup down. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" He blinked. "I heard you. Keep going." He exhaled, long and slow. "There's something else. Something you need to know before you decide anything." He paused. "About Iseul." My whole body went cold. "What about Iseul?" I said. Very quiet, very careful. Siwoo looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. Something between awe and devastation. "Nari found a photo," he said. "Minji's social media. She showed us." His voice dropped. "Yeonwoo, he has Jaehan's hands." The coffee shop jazz kept playing. I said nothing. "We know," Siwoo said softly. "We know about him." The jazz kept playing. Someone at the counter laughed at something. The espresso machine hissed. The whole coffee shop continued existing with complete indifference to the fact that my carefully constructed world had just cracked open down the middle and everything I had been holding inside it was now visible. I put both hands flat on the table. "How long?" I said. "3 days," Siwoo said. "Since Nari found the photo. Yeonwoo, I swear to you, the moment we knew, we came. You came to Chicago for him. We came to Chicago for you," he said. He's the reason we didn't sleep for 3 days straight, but you are why we're here." I looked at him for a long moment. At this man who had stolen blankets and finished my sentences, and stood silent in a living room when I needed him most, and had apparently not stopped paying for that specific silence for 2 full years. "I want to be angry," I said. "You're allowed." "I am angry. I know. I'm also." I stopped, pressed my lips together. "He draws, Siwoo. Iseul. He draws constantly. He's been drawing 3 faces since he was old enough to hold a crayon, and I never described you to him. Not once. I never showed him photos. I never even said your names." My voice stayed steady through sheer force of will. "He already knew you. He's been carrying you around in his blood this whole time, without either of us giving him permission to." Siwoo's jaw moved. He looked at the table, then back at me. His eyes were doing something he was clearly trying to manage and not entirely succeeding at. "Can we see him?" he asked. Not demanding, not entitled, asking. Like he understood completely that this was not his right to claim, but mine to give. Before I could answer, the coffee shop door opened again. Jaehan and Do-yoon walked in together. Jaehan spotted me first. He stopped 2 steps inside the door and just looked at me. 2 years of looking for me, condensed into 3 seconds of standing still. He looked tired in a specific way that had nothing to do with sleep. Do-hyun was beside him, hands in his coat pockets, and when his eyes found mine, something in his expression went very quiet and very soft, in a way that Do-hyun reserved for things that genuinely mattered to him. I looked at all 3 of them. These 3 ridiculous, complicated, infuriating men who had let politics and poor communication and the specific male inability to just say the thing destroy 8 months of something real, and then spent 2 years living in the wreckage of it. I should have made them work harder. I know that. But here's the thing about 2 years of solo parenting, a child who has three fathers written into his bones, it gets heavy. Not impossible, not unbearable, but heavy in the specific way that things get when they were always meant to be shared and aren't. I stood up. Sit down, I said. All of you. We're going to talk. Actually talk. Not perform, not manage, not strategize. And when we're done talking, I'm going to go pick up my son from daycare, and you're going to meet him. But first, I looked directly at Jaehan. You're going to explain everything. The elders, the plan, the phone call, all of it. Out loud, to my face. Jaehan held my gaze. Okay. And then you, I turned to Doyun, are going to tell me what you should have said that night in the living room. Doyun nodded once. Fair. And you, I looked at Siwoo, are going to stop looking at me like that because it is extremely distracting, and I need my full cognitive function right now. Siwoo pressed his mouth together, nodded seriously, immediately continued looking at me exactly like that. Hopeless. All three of them. They talked. I listened. Jaehan explained the elder situation in full, the political maneuvering, the plan he should have shared, the moment he realized I had heard and came outside to find me already gone. Do-hyun told me what he should have said that night, plainly and without decoration, yeah, in that quiet way of his that made every word feel considered and real. Siwoo told me about the 62 calls in the months after, how the pack house started feeling less like home and more like a museum of a decision they couldn't undo. I asked questions, hard ones. They answered without flinching. By the end, I was not fixed. I want to be clear about that. 2 years of single parenthood and complicated grief do not dissolve over one Americano in Logan Square. Trust is not a switch. It is a door, and doors that have been shut for 2 years have stiff hinges and require patience. But I could see the door. That was new. Miss Hana looked only mildly surprised when 4 adults showed up for Iseul's pickup instead of one. Iseul came running out in his bare ear coat, left ear still slightly lower, and stopped 3 feet away from us when he saw them. He looked at Jaehan first. Jaehan crouched down to his level without being told, without hesitation. Like his body already knew the right thing to do, even when the rest of him was still catching up. Iseul took 3 steps forward, reached out and pressed his small fingers against Jaehan's face, patted his jaw twice, studied him with those deep Do-yun eyes. I drawed you, Iseul said simply. Jaehan's breath caught audibly. Yeah, he managed. Iseul turned to Do-yun, pointed. You too, then to Siwoo. And you. You smile funny in my pictures. Siwoo made a sound that was definitely not a laugh, and definitely also was. Iseul looked back at Jaehan, tilted his head. You know my appa? Jaehan looked up at me over Iseul's head, and his eyes were doing something I had never seen from him before. Something completely unguarded and enormous, and slightly terrifying in how honest it was. Yeah, Jaehan said softly. I know your appa. For a long time. Iseul considered this with the gravity of a 2-year-old, making an important administrative decision. Then he held his arms up at Jaehan, with the complete confidence of a child, who had never once doubted he was worth holding. Jaehan picked him up. Iseul settled against his chest, like he had been doing it his whole life, which, in every way that mattered below the surface of things, he had. Do-hyun appeared at my left side, Siwoo at my right, not touching, not assuming, just present. The way they should have been 2 years ago. The way I had quietly needed them to be every day since. Siwoo leaned down slightly. For what it's worth, he murmured near my ear, I never once stopped. Stopped what? I said. Choosing you, he said, even when you weren't there to see it. I looked at Iseul laughing at something Jaehan had said, bright and unself-conscious, completely at home in arms that had never held him before today, and somehow recognized him anyway. I looked at Do-hyun, who was already looking at me, warm and steady and patient as ever. I looked at Siwoo, who was smiling that stupid, familiar smile, the one that had always taken up too much room, and I had always let it anyway. I had left Seattle in the rain with one bag and a secret and a terrifying kind of clarity. I was still clear. But the thing I was clear about had changed shape. You have a long way to go, I told all three of them. All of you. This is not fixed. We are not fixed. There's going to be ground rules and honest conversations and probably at least one argument that wakes the neighbors. Understood, Do-hyun said. Completely fair, Jaehan said, still holding my son like he intended to never put him down. I'll make coffee, Siwoo said. You make terrible coffee, I said, and I've been practicing. For 2 years. Specifically for this moment, he said. So, it better count. Iseul reached back for me then, both arms out, wanting all of us close at once with the shameless totality that only small children and very honest people allow themselves. I stepped forward, and for the first time in 2 years, the weight I had been carrying redistributed itself across 4 people instead of 1, and I felt it. The difference, immediate and undeniable. So, like finally setting down something heavy you had carried so long, you had forgotten it had a weight at all. It was not perfect, but it was ours. And this time, I was staying. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you'll definitely love the next one. It's even wilder and more intriguing than you can imagine, so be sure to check it out and hit subscribe. The next story drops soon,